Miley Cyrus's journey from Disney-fied teen idol to all grown-up sex kitten tested the already strained limits of popular acceptance. So how far is too far? In the next few minutes, meet the offenders and the offended as Lauren explores what our culture limits really are, and at what point does going too far do real damage. This is Context, a look at life beyond the headline.
Today's pop culture is a swirl of language, imagery, and ideas that are constantly reshaping the limits of popular tolerance. And offending is as much a transgression as it is a commodity. And today we'll explore a question you won't see asked anywhere else. Does so-called offensive material cause spiritual damage? To begin, our Sheldon Neal caught up with conservative activist, writer, and broadcaster Ezra Levant, a man for whom going too far is money in the bank.
You're no stranger to the world of offense, but how do you define the term offense? What does that mean to you?
Well, it's a very subjective word. I mean, what one person finds offensive, another person would find encouraging. I think we should each try to be polite in general as people, and I think we should be prepared to pay a social price for whatever offensive things we say. But I think it's important that we not grant to the state the right to define what is or isn't offensive, because each one of us will be offensive one time in our lives. We should have a right as citizens, as free men and women, to be a dissident, to be a rogue. Don't break the law, but to be eccentric.
What offends you when the tables are turned and now you're experiencing or receiving that wrath, if it were in that case?
Well, and that's funny because, I mean, I don't take much personally. I mean, in fact, on my own TV show, I read out a lot of my hate mail because I just want to, I think it's entertaining and it's good to read. But in another way, everything offends me. That's why I'm always railing at things. I regard myself as a reformer. I want to challenge the status quo because so many things about it bug me. So I guess from another way of looking at it, I'm very offended by so many things. I do not accept many things. And that's what motivates me. It's a desire to fix things I find offensive.
In crossing the line, pushing limits as we're talking, I'm wondering, do you feel that's something that our culture needs, that a voice, one might say one crying in the wilderness, if you want to put it more in a religious, faith-based kind of way, but that the need to offend, the need to push limits, it's something that is integral to the building of a society. Would you say that, or?
Well, it's the source of all progress. I mean, to challenge the status quo. Now, don't get me wrong, not everything offensive is valuable. In fact, most offensive things are not valuable. But if we were to abolish or banish anything that offended us, we would be throwing out the germs of great ideas.
I want to go back a little bit, just not too far, but 2012, your program, The Source, broadcasted a commentary titled The Jew versus the Gypsies. How far is too far?
Well, again, this is the difference between personal taste and politeness versus the law. I mean, what I said clearly was not unlawful, and I think we should have the right to say offensive things. In that case, as you pointed out, you know, when you're condemning a group of gypsies, you don't want to paint every single gypsy with the same brush, and that was my mistake there. But that was not a legal mistake, that was not a criminal mistake, that was not a mistake that the state ought to get involved with. It was a mistake of politeness to say, oh, I misspoke. I mean, I speak 2 million words a year on TV or in print. You're going to misspeak. You're going to offend, I offend someone every day. As long as I'm not breaking the law, I ought to be able to let her rip.
Do you think you'd be as an effective communicator if you didn't offend?
Well, it depends what business you're in. I mean, if you're on the cooking channel, you probably don't want to be offensive. You probably want to be charming and pleasant. Maybe you want to offend some old order of how to cook a kind of dish or something, but that's not even really offensive. There's certain lines of work where you don't want to be offensive. You want to be harmonious. You want to be a uniter. You want to smooth over the differences. But that's certainly not the job of a political commentator in a partisan adversarial system like we have. And if you're a political commentator and you do not want to offend, you're probably in the wrong business, because it is built, our whole system depends on offending each other. Not in a harsh or unpatriotic or disloyal way. In fact, look at the title that we give the country's biggest complainer. We call them Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition. We give them a 6-figure job and a free house, because our whole system depends on a complainer, on someone who's offended by everything. The job of Her Majesty's Loyal Opposition is to be offended by everything that the government does, because we need that clash of ideas. The very concept of a vote, they call it calling for a division. Politics has to be divisive, because a lot of questions are yes or no. Not everything can be blended.
So what would you say, even in the case you're involved right now, the lawyer in Regina currently that's happening, would you say, you know what, this is good for business, it's just another thing that I can say, hey, you know, I'm pushing the limits? Or when it's you alone at home, do you say, you know what, take the glasses off and say, you know, Ezra, man, I gotta either change, or maybe I'm going too far, or maybe I'm doing more.
Well, the case you're talking about is a case of lawfare, of someone who disagrees with me, instead of debating me, trying to sue me into submission. And that is a tactic. I think it's an abusive tactic. If someone disagrees with me, they're welcome to come on my show and debate me. But this fella you're referring to, Khurram Awan is his name, he's very easily offended, isn't he? I mean, he was offended by Mark Steyn, who wrote a column about radical Islam, took him to the Human Rights Commission. I wrote about that. He was offended by me. He's suing me in defamation court. I mean, there are some perpetually aggrieved, perpetually offended people with a hair trigger who want to go around shutting up people they don't like. I'm not that kind of person. And neither am I going to be scared of that kind of person, because if I allowed my hecklers to have a veto over me, well, then not only would I be out of business, but this country's democracy wouldn't work.
There's a popular adage that says, you know, what we do today affects our tomorrow. So I'm curious to know, as you ruffle the feathers of some in the past and may very well continue as your career goes on, what kind of tomorrow are you trying to create?
I want to make speech freer in the whole country. That's the process I want to change. But I don't just want free speech for its own sake. I do, but there's certain things I want to talk about freely. I want to talk about the threat of radical Islam. I want to talk about strengthening our economy, and the #1 job creator in Canada right now, oil and gas. I want to use my speech for particular purposes, but I also want to take a step back and say, no matter what I'm interested in, I need that freedom of speech. So I got to help strike down these censorship laws and other limits on free speech. And there's a chill effect. It's not just the only person who's prosecuted. It's 100 other people saying, yikes, he was put through the ringer. I sure don't want that to happen to me.
Great interview, Sheldon. Yes. Did you see a difference between that caustic, on-air Mr. Ezra Levant and the guy who walked into the office?
You know, in short, no. There's absolutely no difference. Great man, very intelligent. I think his main thing is he told me that, you know, everything offends him, and I thought that was very interesting. His main thrust is that he really wants to defend the right to free speech, and says, you know what? If that continues or falls in the hands of the state, where it's regulated on what anyone can say, that's where he has a problem.
And he's going to offend the state. Told us all that's what our job is.
Yes, he says he offends someone every day. I thought that was hilarious.
Alrighty.
Now it's time, though, to hear what you have to think at home. We want to know, what offends you? Is it extremes in language, sexuality, crude behavior? Is it racism? Perhaps there's something that offends you that most other people are okay with. We want to know more, so please send us your answers by phone, email, Facebook, or Twitter.
When we come back, do people want to be offended? A prominent psychologist has some intriguing answers. Well, continuing on our theme, our own Sheldon Neal is asking, what offends you? And it's a new segment we're calling The Rundown.
The Rundown. Real people, real talk.
So what offends me is sex sells. I think there's too much emphasis put on sex and sexualization in the media. You have people like Miley Cyrus twerking on the VMAs, Lady Gaga, she's never wearing anything. And I'm just sick and tired of seeing this emphasis put on sex sells. Like, can we have something else to choose from, like talent? Come on.
Really bad drivers, people who are inconsiderate when other people are crossing the street when it's their light, and who don't really look where they're going. And it's not even necessarily that they're not good at driving, but that they just don't care. So I wish there were like stickers we could throw at them that said, I am a bad driver, and people will know, but yeah.
What offends me? You want to know what offends me? I'll tell you what offends me. What offends me is politicians who think that we, the voters, are stupid. You listen to all the stuff going on right now in the Senate and with Harper. Do they really think we didn't know that there was mud hanging around, that they were going to be wallowing in all of this stuff? And now we get to listen to it for months and months and months, and the money that's wasted ticks me right off.
And that's your rundown. And I am back here in the studio audience, and I'm actually here with
Maya.
Maya, great to have you here on Context. Let me ask you, what offends you?
I think what offends me a lot is the way that media masks a lot of its different things, sexual exploitation and that kind of thing, under the guise of pushing the envelope. I find that it's a pattern that kind of like perpetuates, where people say, oh, this is offensive, and then they accept it, and it's normalized, and it's like things kind of escalate.
All right, well, crossing the line, rarely a day goes by when public tolerance isn't tested. And what is the impact on that, on society, on all of us, when limits are crossed? Our next guest to help us navigate that is Jordan Peterson, a professor of psychology at the University of Toronto, a clinical psychologist, and the author of Maps of Meaning. Jordan Peterson, welcome to Context. Great you can be with us. Thank you. Thanks. Thank you. Okay. As a clinical psychologist, I loved listening to your lectures, but I must say, I'm thinking he's a clinical psychologist and he's lecturing, get your head screwed on right. Are you insane? Like, those are a little bit offensive to coming out of a doctor's mouth. What's your personal boundaries on casting offense?
Well, I was raised in northern Alberta, so I'm a little bit of a barbarian, you know.
Your redneck is carefully hidden under the yellow shirt.
So, I don't know. It's blunt speech, I suppose, and it's a bit colloquial. It's not supposed to offend. It's supposed to be direct. And sometimes directness can be confused with or confused with impoliteness. Maybe it is impolite, but it's direct.
You do talk about that we've been giving warnings in our psyche. Tell us about the purpose of warnings in our psyche.
Well, if you're put together well, the reason that you're warned by your psyche is that you're crossing some sort of boundary that's there for your own best interests. And sometimes it's for your best long-term interests. I mean, part of morality is always balancing what's exciting and interesting in the short term with what's going to work for a large number of people, say over large expanses of time. And what works in the short term and what works in the long run aren't the same thing.
So what is going on when we have short term? You saw all the Miley Cyrus stuff that we rolled, or someone like Mayor Rob Ford. You've got public figures, role models, expressing off the charts behavior, and their popularity soars. Why is that going on when offensive behavior actually makes people more popular? What's going on?
Well, I think this Miley Cyrus and the Rob Ford issues are quite distinct, but I mean, television is a medium that demands attention-getting behavior. I mean, it feeds on very brief bits of very interesting material. And, of course, sexuality is always interesting, whether you're offended by it or not. And so it can be counted on to attract attention, and that's money.
And it's shocking when you look at, if I can take your lecture on virtue or Miley's, no one's very interested in virtue compared to the offensive material. What is the value of virtue in this kind of culture?
Well, virtue always has the same value, which is that it helps you live the kind of life that makes you able to tolerate being alive. That's what virtue is. I mean, life is hard. It's tragic. Everybody bears a lot of burden, and there's no way out of that. And what virtue essentially is a path that you chart that makes you best able to not so much to tolerate that, but to accept it, and to accept it as a necessity and to live well despite it.
It used to be the church, the religious structures in our culture helped set the boundaries for virtue. And now that has been offensive. How has that happened?
For a long time, the church was the central authority, and your relationship with God was mediated through the church. And after the Protestant Revolution hit, then people were the arbiters of their own relationship with God, and at some point that means the degeneration of the church, and it's left to people's individual opinions. And then, of course, institutions always tend to be corrupted, and so people look at church institutions and see that they're corrupted in some ways, and You know, they can't buy morality from those sources.
So the secret is getting honest with yourself and what you're receiving.
Part of the way that you keep yourself on track is by trying not to muddy up your own waters. But you have to be open to communication with other people too, because they often have things to tell you that you need to know. So, I mean, part of the way people keep themselves sane is through dialogue with other people. We're kind of all involved in a joint exercise at regulating our mutual sanity, which is also partly why people do become offended, because they see now and then that individuals are behaving in a way that upsets that balance. And you see that, let's take the Miley Cyrus case. I mean, hypothetically, what she's doing is offering the audience something that's valuably related to artistic performance. But she's doing that by exploiting her beauty and her sexual attractiveness. And that seems crooked in some ways, because what she's offering as a commodity is enhanced in its value by something that shouldn't necessarily be associated with it. So it's cheap. It's also not helpful to make sexuality something that's casual. As much as people like to think that it could be casual, it's never casual, and it's not casual partly because it's integrally tied up with emotional well-being, but it's also not casual because individual sexuality has a very massive role on cultural and the physical health of cultures.
Like examine myself why I am offended then. Examine what is the trigger that's going off in my psyche, what's about to be protected in me when I am registering offense.
Yeah, well, sometimes you can be offended because you hate. And that happens a lot. So you have to make sure that your motives are clear. And you can't just do that casually. You have to work on that for years before you're straight enough to make intelligent judgments.
All right, Dr. Jordan Peterson, fascinating stuff. There's lots more about Dr. Peterson on the web. And we'll turn again to a man voted least likely to offend anyone by his graduating class, Sheldon Neal.
Oh boy, those watching at home, that's not yet true. But I will tell you though that it has a nice ring to it. Anyway, those watching at home, we want to know what offends you. Please, we want to know what you have to say. Please get in contact with us. The question is, what offends you? Should anything, we want to know. Is it free speech? We want to know what is that point for you. Please send us your answers by phone, email, Facebook, or Twitter. I cannot wait to read it.
All right, and coming up, best-selling author Ted Dekker's tightrope act between faith and secular culture has won him millions of fans and has readers on both sides accusing him of going too far. Stay with us. It was really good.
We want you to be a part of our studio audience. If you're in the Toronto area, contact us. It wouldn't be the same without you.
Ted Dekker is a best-selling New York Times author that has gotten himself in hot water for offending people in a few of the wrong places of the church. And he joins us now from Austin, Texas. Hello, Ted.
Hi, Lorna. It's good to be with you.
All right, so you write fiction about the human struggle. Why would that offend people? Where are you crossing the line?
It doesn't really offend my readers, obviously, because they read many, many of my books. But some people have a difficulty with darkness because they themselves have a lot of fear inside of them. You know, the only way to overcome fear, we all have fear in our lives, and the only way to overcome that fear is to walk into it, not hide from it. It's, you know, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Well, the only way to do that is to walk into that dark valley and discover that death is only a shadow, and beyond it there is light, there is hope. And I think a lot of Christians in particular are bound up in fear. There's no need to fear. So what I do is I take my characters and I put them into difficult situations where they have large, significant struggles, real struggles, authentic struggles, the kind of struggles I've had, pain, suffering, and I take them in through that valley of darkness with my readers, and to discover that there's actually great hope and light beyond it. So my story is actually ultimately about love and beauty, but it's a journey getting there.
Okay.
Actually, that's what I think makes my book so popular.
And so offensive it would appear because, and I shouldn't say so offensive because like you say, you're selling lots of books, but you quoted the Bible, and about going through the valley of the shadow of death. So is that why you've got the genre of horror, of suspense and thriller? It's not where we expect to see the Christian story come in.
Well, you know, most of my books are thrillers. They're not characterized as horror at all. I wrote one book with another writer named Frank Peretti called House, which could be classified as horror. Most of them are thrillers. I was once, you know, on a television interview not so long ago, and they asked me the same question. They said, what's your favorite story from faith, or even the Bible that has a lot of horror or fear in it? And I said, well, the Garden of Gethsemane. I mean, you think of Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, he was terrified of what was to come before him. So fearful, in fact, that he had a terrible, terrible struggle there, and yet he walked through it. And this is the same path that we get to follow. If we really want to overcome our fear, we don't run and hide from it, we walk through it. A novel is a perfect place to do that because it's kind of a safe exploration. We're taking the ride with the reader, but we're not actually in their situation. So I might write about serial killers, or I might write about, you know, some dark situations, but there's always beauty beyond it. And we take the journey with the character and discover for ourselves that beauty.
Do you actually think sin, and you might put it in suspense or horror in your novels, is it still that real, that evil?
We all face evil. It's the monsters in our lives that feed at us and weaken us and keep us out of that place of freedom and love and beauty and peace. You're facing fear whenever you're not at peace. The root of every negative emotion is ultimately fear.
What does the Christian story have to say about that struggle, the fear that you're facing?
Well, the Christian story has to say that if we let go of all that we think keeps us safe in this world, which seems counterintuitive, but actually as you let go of this world, meaning those things that we think keep us safe, even our relationships, I mean, even everything, then we find our true selves, and we find our Father, and in His realm, in the kingdom of heaven, which is within us, we find a place of great safety, and then we can truly enjoy this life and love others the way we are loved. We can't do this when we're running in fear and we're trying to protect ourselves from the enemy. No. Jesus said, when the evil man comes against you, do not resist him.
Okay, you know, explain that. That's confusing.
It's confusing, not if you understand any transformational teaching, which is, don't take the offense, let it go through you, don't fear it, let it go, and you find yourself really invulnerable, in a place of great strength. And then and only then can you really offer love. And love always overcomes, you know? Love always overcomes.
The Christian story is this amazing gift of love that comes in an offensive symbol, the cross, the symbol of sacrifice, blood, suffering. How has that offensive symbol to some affected you and what you've drawn from it for your writing?
Well, for me, the cross is primarily the death of this human nature that is full of fear. So taking up your cross daily, as we call it within Christianity as such, is basically letting go of fear. In other words, that is essentially facing your fear. Face the death of your false self daily. Let go of what you protect, and let go. Let it die, and there you will find true life. So the cross is not something you cling to as a symbol of fear. It's essentially the letting go of fear by going willingly to that place where you let go of all those things that give you fear in this life, not by running from them, by facing them.
All right.
And in the same way that Jesus did, he feared very much going to the cross, and yet he went willingly. Not my will, but your will be done. We too get to follow that beautiful, beautiful path into the kingdom of light in heaven.
Ted Decker, what an interesting conversation. Thank you very much.
Oh, it's been my pleasure. Thank you.
All right, and when we return, the last word on crossing the line and its capacity to do spiritual damage or help. Stay tuned.
We want you to be a part of our studio audience. If you're in the Toronto area, contact us. It wouldn't be the same without you.
The language you hear in primetime television, the lyrics on your radio, the graphic content now commonplace in today's media would have landed their makers in jail just half a century ago. But part of the equation that's rarely discussed is why we're given the capacity to be offended. Is it an instinctive survival tool to protect us from spiritual damage? And does it need to be honed and tuned so we're sensitive to truth threats and tolerant of the harmless ones? As a Christian, it's instructive to note what did and did not offend Jesus Christ. It's a given that he ran with some pretty rough company, but the Bible records that he took great offense to those who turned their backs on God, and especially those who caused others to turn away from God. Jesus was always offering access to the Father God. It's a spiritual survival tool that may or may not raise your hackles up in offense. For all of us, I'm Lorna Dueck. Thanks for watching. Join us next week as we explore life beyond the headlines.